So I'm just going to open up the scene here, and it's just a simple 3D scene that I had set up already, and I already know that everything works in advance, which really isn't the best, to always have. But we're going to go ahead and make broken files later. That's for another video. So here I have a 3D object which is acting as a skeleton, which is just a point in space, which in this case looks like a cube, but really we're only tracking the object center, which is over here. So we have this point in space, this one object, and this one object will be our rig, and our rig will control our geometry. Okay. Now, looking at geometry, well, if we look down here, we can see that we have an X, Y, and Z kind of feedback. And as I put my mouse back into the viewport, you can see that I have a bunch of numbers coming back and just yelling at me. That's just letting me know where my cursor is in this case, X, Y space within the viewport space. But if we select an object, you can see that it's reading back where this object is within 3D space, within the world. Okay, so if you remember back to your math class, how you had a Cartesian plane. If I kind of make this a little smaller here, you can see that I just have this little grid. If you remember graphing, this is essentially what we're working with. We're just working with points in X and Y, and Z for our depth. Alright, so when we're generating objects, we're just making a container, an invisible container, saying, hey, I want to make something here. And in this case, this something is called plane 2, and we can define plane 2 with different elements. Now, in this case, we have plane 2, and the parts that are defining it are actually underneath here. So if we go ahead to this modify tab, we can see that we have different things that are defining it. The most important, the bare information that's defining it, is this editable poly. It's just a group of information that was pre-programmed, and this helps us to make the generation process a little bit easier. So everything in here are things that create this 3D object. So if I were to go to vertex, if you kind of pay attention to the corners of our geometry, the second I hit vertex, you're going to notice that I have these blue dots appear, and all they are just representations of what we want the plane 2 to look like. So if I were to click here, you would see a few things. One, I get the location of the object in 3D space, and you can see that I'm able to use special tools to go ahead and move these things around. But if I go ahead and move this, we can effectively change the look of our 3D geometry. And you can see as I move them, the reference to where they are in 3D space also changes. So if I were to move that down and export it, it's going to say, alright, the exporter is going to look at this object, and it's going to look at this component, or this part of the object that makes up our plane 2. It's going to say, alright, this should have vertices. Let me go grab all the vertices. So it's going to go grab them and number them, and then it's going to say, okay, each vertice is in a particular space, so it's going to go ahead and do that. Then it's going to break everything up into different parts. It's going to say, you know what, this object only has 4 vertices, and what are the relationships to each other. So then what it does, it draws these lines here, and those lines are just edges. Okay, so the edges just show how these vertices are connected, and the space that they enclose and make is going to be our polygon. Okay, so that that's really just the basis of what type of information we're working with. We're working with a polygon object that has vertices, and those vertices are connected by edges to define a polygon. Okay, in this case, this type of polygon has 4 sides, so this is commonly called a quad. Now, ironically enough, no matter how many sides your geometry has, the computer is going to break it up into three-sided faces. So it's going to make imaginary three. It's going to make an imaginary. It's going to make an imaginary line between this, in between this, these two, or in between. This face, so it's going to go it's going to make an imaginary dotted line, and then instead of being one face, it's going to actually be two faces, or two tries. So that's just a little bit about the 3D information that we're working with, and we can go ahead and check out the information if we kind of select our object, right mouse button click, and then we go to properties here, and then we can see the location of the physical of the whole object here, and we can also see, you know, it's made up of 4 vertices and 1 face. Cool. So we have faces. We should understand a little bit about what vertices are, edges and faces are. If you don't, it's okay. It's not really mandatory to understand, but the more you understand, the easier this whole process will be. Next, I have this thing, which is something else that's helping define this object. This is, again, it's just pre-programmed code, and this code here allows me to select objects within the 3D view that are going to offset the points of my vertices. So in this case, the skin modifier, as it's called, allows me to connect this dummy object, which happens to be this square, which again, we're only looking at that at the center point of the square, and that center point, whenever that gets moved, is going to move the points of my geometry by a similar distance that I moved it. So that's basically what this is. So if I go ahead and select a vertex here, well, let's do this again. I'm going to go ahead to my skin, select my skin, and then I'm going to go have edit enabled. I'm going to select that guy. You can see that it's highlighted, and I'm going to say, you know what, I don't want you to be affected at all by dummy 1. So I'm going to go ahead and select dummy 1, and then I'm going to move it, and you can see all the points are going to move with the exception of that one. So basically, wherever I move this guy, all the verts are going to move with the exception of that one, because that's what I defined within this object here. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo that. Okay. So then let's go ahead and select our plane 2. And then I'm just going to go ahead and select this vert. Select that vert and just reapply it. So hopefully we understand a little bit about what vertices are, how they make our 3D object, and how they relate to our rig, our skeleton.